Hey all, welcome to Film Suck, a Patreon podcast in which we ponder the work of art in the age of crap cinema. I'm Eileen Jones.
I'm Dolores McElroy.
And today, just a quick shout out to Movie Night Extravaganza. They've once again invited me to come on as their guest. Wednesday, February 4th, it'll be live at 8 p.m. We're talking about one battle after another. They're doing a whole series on Oscar-nominated films, and only too happy to have an excuse to watch that movie again and talk about it. A Movie Night Extravaganza, hosted by Forrest Flacco Miller, Conan Neutron, and Christina Oakes. And of course, we're talking about it's up for 13 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, that's Paul Thomas Anderson, Best Actor, Leonardo DiCaprio, Best Supporting Actor, both Benicio del Toro and Sean Penn, Best Cinematography, Michael Bauman, and you can go on and on through practically every major technical award. So anyway, that'll be quite exciting. I'm looking forward to it. And that is it for today's shout outs. So let's move on to the film we're talking about, which is Hamnet. We're finally getting to it. Chloe Zhao's very successful, they're calling it a period tragedy. And it is still drawing crowds. It came out, what was the date? I've got it somewhere. December, I think it was early December in wide release. It had an even earlier limited release. Mm-hmm. So incredibly enough, there's still lines. I went to see No Other Choice, and there was a huge line, and I was all worried, like, oh no, we're not going to be able to get in. And it wasn't. It was for Hamnet. Mm-hmm. And then when I went last night, it was almost full. Dolores, you said sold out.
2 weeks ago, it was sold out. I could not get into the last screening on a Sunday at 2 p.m. in Santa Fe. And then it came back, and I just saw it yesterday, full theater at an 11:15 a.m. screening.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's really having a huge impact. And of course, everyone is talking about the ending, which people are just finding devastating. If you go see it in the theaters, which you should, because how often do you go to a film where people are really crying? I mean, they're really crying at the end. And that's clearly a big part of the allure. It's the huge emotional impact, which we get all too rarely these days. I mean, that used to be movies stock and trade. You went because it was sensational and it was emotionally moving. And so to have it come back again, of course, is always, a really welcome thing. Very quickly, this is a film based on the 2020 novel by Suzanne Farrell. She co-wrote
Maggie O'Farrell?
Oh, is it Maggie?
I think so. I think Suzanne, you said, but I think it's Maggie O'Farrell.
I think you're right. Where did I get Suzanne? I don't know either. All right. Yes, Maggie O'Farrell, who co-wrote the script with Chloe Zhao, who again obviously directed. It's about the courtship and marriage of William Shakespeare and Agnes Hathaway, also known historically as Anne Hathaway. And their relationship faces its greatest trial when their beloved son Hamnet dies. And he really did die, probably of the plague, though they aren't sure, in 1596 at the age of 11. Paul Mescal and Jessie Buckley star in those leading roles. And the film's been out again for, this is 2 months now, and doing gangbusters business again because of the powerful emotional impact. And it's been nominated for the following Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actress, Best Casting, that's Nina Gold, Best Costume Design, Malgosia Trzanska. Best Production Design, that's Fiona Crombie and Alice Felton, and Best Original Score, Max Richter. Before we start discussing all of this, please note, as usual, there will be spoilers. If you know your Shakespeare history, you'll know at least the basics. And there's, obviously telling you Hamnet dies is not a surprise because that's the whole crux of the matter. But yeah, we're going to tell all as usual. So if you want to see this, and you really should, it's kind of an extraordinary experience. Do it before you listen to us or watch us, as in the case may be. All right, so let's just plunge in. So, Dolores, what'd you think of Hamnet?
Well, okay, I think we were both on the same page that there's a reason we are just reviewing this.
Yeah.
I think we're both like, I don't want to see Hamnet. And it's a combination of like, if you kind of know what it's about, I'm not super psyched to sign up to see a child die, So that was, I was dreading that. I was like, I don't want to be torn into pieces, which you are. And then there's the factor of everyone loves it, it's one of those. And especially Santa Fe, there's like the white bourgeois blessing. And I'm like, oh God, everyone loves it, which can't be good. But I love Chloe Zhao. I love Nomadland, and I really love The Rider. I think The
Mhm.
Rider is one of my favorite films,
Mhm.
at least of the last like 20 years.
Mhm.
And I've taught The Rider, and I think it's like really extraordinary. So I was like, all right, we'll do it for Chloe.
Mhm.
And uh, I also will say I wasn't excited about the cast. I have an anti Jessie Buckley bias. Even though I recognize her talent, I do. But I've always said she reminds me of a grad student. There's something like self-righteous about her that I
Mhm.
find very
Mhm.
off-putting. And she maintains that quality, but she's very moving and she's very good.
Mhm.
And she's very well cast here. I also think Paul Mescal is the most overrated actor of our
I
day.
am with you. Oh my god.
Like a non-presence. I don't know how this man was in Gladiator, A Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway, which I can't even
Oh.
picture. And then he gets to be this juicy role of William Shakespeare.
Mhm.
He's fine. He's not astonishing. I continue to find him forgettable. It's like,
Mhm.
were you on screen? He's like, to me, like has zero impact, but he was inoffensive here. So there were a lot of things. I had a lot of bias against this thing. It won me over.
Mhm.
Um, it is stunning to look at. Chloe is known for her love of the natural landscape. I know people attribute a lot of Terrence Malick influence to her work. I mean, I can see it in terms of like there are a lot of treetops, but I don't. To me, I've not found her as sentimental as Terrence Malick. Although
Mhm.
here, perhaps she verges on it. I mean, you can't help it with this material.
Mhm.
Um, it's incredibly moving. To me, it is a very emotionally realistic portrait of loss. I've never lost a child, but I've lost people, and there's the loss is pretty unrelenting, and it's explored in depth. And there were times like the child dies of the plague, and from the beginning, just because you come into the film due to the publicity, kind of knowing what's going to happen, you're
Mhm.
kind of just like clenching your stomach, bracing for it.
Mhm.
But that is kind of effective because that's also the mother's journey. The main character, Jessie Buckley's character, Agnes, has like a second sight, sort of, and she thinks she knows that one of her children is going to die. She misdiagnoses it actually, and she has twins, and her girl child dies. The girl twin dies instead of Hamnet. Hamnet dies instead of his
Mhm.
twin sister, the girl. So she missees things, but in her own life, she knows like death is going to come for one of her children, and that's a lot to carry, as an audience member and as a main character.
Mhm.
The questions around death I thought were very beautifully explored,
Mhm.
um, especially the question about like where do they go,
Mhm.
which is a haunting one for anyone. I think regardless of your faith, maybe there are those among us who really have a clear picture and are very certain where people go, but I doubt that's true of most of us.
Mhm.
The visions. So, last week we saw the Testament of Anne Lee, and we
Mhm.
both thought that it failed on the
Yeah.
religious vision side.
Yeah.
This succeeds, I think,
Mhm.
in picturing death.
Mhm.
We'll talk about this in more depth, but
Mhm.
in the film's imaginary world of where young Hamnet goes, it echoes the stage setting of Hamlet, the
Mhm.
play. And there's something wooded, and then there's a sort of dark void that he enters in both the imaginary realm, and then the play setting of Hamlet also conjures this.
Mhm.
And that void is something that we're introduced to at the beginning of the film. It's a dark hole in a tree in a forest as well, and it's part of the natural realm out of which Agnes emerges. So it's a place of birth. She gives her birth to her children there. It's also a place of death. And this isn't hackneyed because it's true. So I found some of the reviews have been uncomfortable with it.
Mhm.
Justin Chang of The New Yorker and whoever wrote the BBC's review.
Mhm.
Um, and I think Justin Chang called it grief porn. I don't see it that way. I think that that's coming from people, those critics who are like uncomfortable with grief. Um, this film is not uncomfortable with grief. It delves right in. But that's hard. Like, gird your loins, you know, like, woo, I did a lot of weeping. Everyone next to me did a lot of weeping. And I knew that was going to happen, and I wasn't excited for it. So it's kind of hard to psych yourself into this. But then at the end, I do feel like I emerged with some kind of something to hang on to. And that is a theme within the play, that art is a way to hang on and get a grip on how to keep living life with this enormous burden of knowing that everything you love will pass. You know, that's what the play Hamlet does, and it's also what the film Hamnet does. So ultimately, I was grateful for the experience, but boy howdy, it was it was like pretty relentless at times, and I did not enjoy seeing the young child racked with pain. You know, I mean, it was really hard. So I'll stop there. And Eileen, what did you think?
Yeah, in many points we're in total agreement. I had exactly the same prejudices. And in fact, I do think the grief porn aspect of it is coming from one's expectations. It certainly was my expectation. I'm just like, I am not into this. Flogging the death of a child, that's the cheapest maneuver. So I'm prepared to hate this thing. And I also find Jessie Buckley abrasive at the same time as I have to acknowledge, God damn her, she's good.
Yep.
And there's no getting rid of her because she's that good. So she is going to keep getting major roles and collecting awards. She's the one to beat, frankly.
Yep.
For the Oscar, I think there's no question about that. But again, abrasive. She's not someone I'm like eagerly going, gotta see that next Jessie Buckley movie. No. And Paul Mescal, I'm even further along the path of what the hell. Almost a huge chunk of my review of the Gladiator sequel was, what is that black hole in the center of the screen where the actors see? It just, if you ever wanted to appreciate Russell Crowe, all you have to do is watch the next Gladiator and go, meh. He's big. Why? No wattage.
Yeah.
No wattage. There's just nothing happening. Well, again, he's fine. He can even he seems able to handle the Shakespearean delivery. He's fine there. It's not that there's anything wrong. He's just so nothing, and you're just like, oh, okay. Yeah. Jessie Buckley is bringing whatever wattage all around him, and they do have a characterization of Will Shakespeare unlike anything I've ever even thought of, which is that he's very troubled and quiet and can't speak socially at all, and is, so horribly impaired by not being able to get on with his work that she has to sort of make him go live in London and all these other things. I mean, it's not like we know a tremendous amount about Shakespeare or God knows his wife. We almost know nothing. We know so little that the novel is generated out of a lot of imagination and what little we do know. We know a little more about him, obviously, but he was so hyper competent. I mean, he was so the soul and center of what was going on in theater. He was such a big deal guy that, in a way that you just feel like he can't have been all that shy and socially impaired, or he just couldn't have been that person.
Right.
But at any rate, you just go, fine. For this conceit, fine. For me, I think I was more resistant even than you, perhaps. I just was like, I'm going to not like this movie. And for many of the reasons you say, but I just add extra emotions. I'm just like, I think we talked about this is like a pill you're being asked to swallow or something. Or maybe it was another friend I was talking. We were just like, isn't it this is being force fed to you? Everyone's going, you must see it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's going to be miserable agony. Everyone's going to cry in the end because it's a kid dying. I just don't want to do this kind of thing. And so I was very, very resistant. And I found myself probably wrong-headedly being very excessively irritated by things for a long time. It took till, and everyone's talking about the quite long final sequence when Agnes finally comes to London. She's been resisting coming to London ever. If you know anything about Shakespeare and his relationship to his wife, they lived quite separate lives. He lived in London much of the time. She stayed in Stratford, and he would come home for periods of time and then go back. And there are wild theories about why that is, including one misogynistic one that's ludicrous, which is that he hated his wife. This is an actual scholarly opinion. Oh yeah, there's and then out of what is the evidence for this? She was 26 and he was 18 when they married. She was pregnant. As far as they can, they have a few records of like births and baptisms and deaths, and out of this they can sort of judge, I guess. And he lived so much of his life in London while she stayed in Stratford, and he willed her the second best bed. And I'm just like, really? You can't imagine that there might be a reason that the second best bed had sentimental value for some reason that they spent time in that bed? And come on, boys. But, out of this theory, and, if you read interviews with Maggie O'Farrell and Chloe Zhao talking about writing the script, they cite this theory. With O'Farrell going, I just didn't see any reason at all to buy the idea that he hated his wife. It just seems like the stretch of the century, and I'm like, I'm right there with you. It's absurd. Yep. So things like this that you sometimes can find super infuriating if you read up on literary figures from long past when we barely know anything. Just wild theories. But at any rate, I'm going off on a tangent from what little I know. But certain characterizations I found a little bit. I should have loved more than I did throughout. So I'm wearing this witchy hat in honor of the portrayal of Agnes, which of course they don't know, but the portrayal is she's the woman of the forest, and she comes from a matrilineal line. They all kind of emerged from the forest to encounter a husband figure that they sort of recognize almost immediately. They have all the healing skills through, what their knowledge of plants that they pass down to one another. And Agnes especially is socially sort of ostracized. She's regarded as weird in her family and apparently weird in the community because frankly, it's the woman who knows too much, classic witch figure. She's, again, a seer. They see things. So what she sees, the vision she sees, is there are two children standing at her deathbed. So one of them is going to die. And when the twins are born, the girl, Judith, is apparently not alive. And then kind of comes back, but is sickly and more prone. So, of course, she's focusing on Judith is going to be the one to die. So she's giving her all. And the way it's plotted is she won't go to London because London is so much unhealthier. The air is bad. There's so much more plague that spreads easily. It's healthier in the countryside. So she lives in the countryside with the children, and he goes back and forth. And then just while she's focusing everything on Judith, Hamnet is the one who winds up dying. I just found the emphasis on her character a little much, to the point of there's a way of doing period, and one of the ways is everybody's filthy all the time. Nobody combs their hair. I find that irritating. Everyone's fingernails are just filthy all the time. I'm like, well, in her case, she's literally digging in the soil, avid gardener, raising herbs, blah, blah, blah. In his case, once he's a writer, I don't think his hands are filthy all the time. Her hair, I think sometimes she probably would have combed it. Yeah. I'm sorry. If you look at the hair arrangements of the time, nobody's hair is just like all the time. But hers is, because that's some notion of how a witchy woman would look. So I got a little fed up with things like that. But again, I was being overly irritable and critical. I mean, that's the characterization. She's a very, idiosyncratic individual just because of who she is and how much more strongly she's inclined toward this matriarchal line than anyone else in her family or community. So she literally has a pet hawk. Oh, here I've got my own familiar. This is my pet fox. This is my fox. Nice. So I didn't have a hawk, so I brought the fox. Anyway, and that's how they meet. They meet through the fox. The hawk. He comes up and strokes the hawk. It's all, and he seems to recognize her instantly as the one. Mm-hmm. And there's a kind of instant, enormous attraction, and they're off to the races very quickly as recognizing extraordinary and unusual qualities. They're both kind of estranged from their families. Mm-hmm. Will is regarded as, the useless son who's not really good at glove making, who's not really good at any kind of labor. Well, for obvious reasons, he's a born writer. His father is literally beating him, and you're like, the guy looks like he's pushing 40, but they're supposed to be very young. They can't pull that off at all. You're watching this going, they both look like they're pushing 40.
I know.
What's happening? How are they still having under the thumbs of their? But you just have to go with that. You just have to ignore all that. But for me, I had a retroactive experience. This is the visions, and I high points for visions. Visions matter, and she nails these down. I can't believe anyone doesn't recognize the greatness of this film. It's in these absolutely CGI-free but brilliantly conceived visions that you can use practical effects to achieve. So when Hamnet dies, there's the most beautiful effect. It's see-through cloth, but very rough, like homemade cloth. And he's just, when he's dying and then dead, he's just on the other, he's in his family's rooms, but he's on the other side. So he can't communicate, and he's sort of wandering lost in the rooms where he lives. And yes, there's this dark, yawning doorway that he goes and stands at the precipice of, and you are horrified that he's going to have to go, this little boy by himself, through this doorway. And then, of course, when she goes to the, husband and wife are getting estranged over the way they're handling grief. He wasn't there. He was in London as usual when Hamnet dies in agony and absolute, contortions of agonies. He can't breathe. The traumatized Agnes can't forgive Will for not being there. Will is overloaded with guilt and can't cope. It's not at all an unusual thing for couples to, in fact, often split up after the death of a child. It's so much that the relationship can't bear it. So this is kind of happening to them. And then, finally she winds up being persuaded to go to see this. She thinks he's doing comedies, which, by the way, if you read up on William Shakespeare, he actually was doing comedies after the death of his son. And they have hunted throughout his work to find, I'll quote one later, some beautiful lines, but there's in various plays where they find things that they think refer to, his son. And certainly Hamlet, just from the name. Hamlet and Hamnet apparently were virtually interchangeable names at the time. So anyway, so he's pouring everything into his work, which is his way of coping, and she can't forgive this, but she finally winds up going to town to see this play. And when you get to the play, there's the painted flat of a beautifully done, very simple, over black, the leaves of the forest, the trees. There's nothing on it but the forest, the all-encompassing forest, and there's the same doorway into blackness. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, she's got it. She's got it. I can't believe it. She had enough, vision, confidence. She knew what to go for. Maybe it's described in the book, that I don't know. But it's perfect. As soon as you see it, before you even see the drama, you're just like, yep. And you kind of already have a feeling of how the last moments are going to go. The ending works so well that I had to retroactively go, yeah, I'm wrong, because it couldn't have this kind of impact if it had been as, as I was experiencing it. So major respect. Yeah, everyone's crying, and you could say, well, that's easy, cheap. It isn't like that. It really is. It really just gets you by the throat. It's very, very intense. And, they're cherry picking Hamlet for the scenes that speak most immediately. So you really feel strongly like, yeah, they're just swapping out father-son relationships. So have Will Shakespeare play the dead father whose ghost appears to Hamlet. Hamlet is clearly Hamnet, only he's a young man who's grown up. There's all these reasons, though, that the sections of the play that they use speak directly to the relationship of father and son, what we know of the son's aspirations, his own theatrical aspirations. He hoped to act in his father's plays. All of this pays off like just beautiful in these kind of beautiful resonances where the transformative power of art comes through even more strongly than if it had been a more literal way of representing the son's death. So it's so strong, the ending, that I literally just went, Eileen, you're just mistaken. So you're going to have to, when you can, go back and watch the whole thing again, knowing that the ending, which is so perfectly realized, is that she knows where she's going, and it's going to really be a killer when she gets there. So surprised. I'm very surprised, but really, really strong. So you should see it. Yeah.
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 You see it.
Yeah.
It's stunning, and if you, even if you don't like art, but especially if you do,
Yes.
I think it's yeah, it's one of the greatest testaments to the power of art. And at the end, Prince Hamlet is speaking his lines, but the whole audience just like reaches out to him.
Oh, that's a beautiful. Yes, it's so young Hamlet. He's dying, right? It's when he's already been he's been stabbed slash poisoned, and he's reaching. He's got his hand out, and Jessie Buckley's character Agnes just reaches out instinctively and takes his hand, and everyone's hand comes out, and you're just like, oh, it's so, we can't do justice to it just describing it. It's so well directed, the way slowly the whole audience, and the grief reactions of the audience when he dies, and she realizes it's not just her, and turns to look, and everyone around her is overcome by grief, and you're just like, God, I'd like to see that production of Hamlet. That one, that's the one I want to see that I've certainly never seen. So wow, yeah, and it's, even if you're not into art, but you'd like to see what is meant. It always sounds so highfalutin.
Yep.
What art, the place art can have in people's lives, that it can reconcile you to your own human plight in portraying it in certain ways that you feel, your place in eternity. You can make any kind of sense of things. Religion can obviously do some of this, philosophy can do so, but art can do a lot in this way. And this is just this is all about this is what the whole movie's about. Yes. That she has no idea, she doesn't really understand. She knows he's a great writer, but she never witnesses his work until she can finally achieve. So of course they don't have to at the end. There's also wonderfully strong in that there's none of this going back to see them reconciled. You don't need it. Mm-hmm. You don't need any, you already know. Now she understands his grief. He's witnessed her at the edge of the stage. She even says, look at me, and he seems to hear her, even though physically he couldn't hear her. Mm-hmm. And he turns around and looks at her at this point, so that they're already reconciled because of the way it's handled. So you just things like that are just instinctively so right, and Chloe Zhao handles so incredibly well.
Yes.
I was really shocked, I have to say.
And this is not a natural subject for her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I think the through lines I can pull out are, and I think the New York Times might have mentioned this as well. Her protagonists are usually like very self-determined people who are just doing what they have to do. Mm-hmm. In The Rider, the protagonist is a rodeo rider who is injured, but he's got to keep riding the rodeo, right?
Yeah.
In Nomadland, it's Frances McDormand as a woman who like knows she just has to head out on the road. There are economic reasons, but she knows how she wants to handle it, and she wants independence. And then there's Will Shakespeare here, and also Agnes. So they're very like self-determined characters, but historical, epic from Chloe Zhao, not what I was expecting. Usually she's doing something very contemporary, very rooted in the American landscape, even though I believe she's Chinese born. She's like, infatuated with the West, the American West. And usually like hyper realism is kind of her like calling card. So this was like it's definitely out of like her normal track. I didn't see The Eternals, which is the Marvel movie she directed. It did not receive raves or anything, but that's interesting. I hope to see it soon, And I do think, even though there is so much of this that is like, it is gutting, and it is, I suppose, melodrama in the, in a true sense. I do think there's like a certain amount of restraint that she exercises that is effective. Like there's a quietness to her work, except I agree. Several reviewers have mentioned the use of the composer Max Richter's The Nature of Daylight. It's a song that is used in this film. It was also used in Arrival and some other films. I didn't recognize it, but there were moments where I was like, the music is a bit much.
Yeah.
And that's when it was like a little Terrence Malick for the first time
Mm,
I've ever thought that in her work. Um,
mm,
music is usually not a big part of her style.
mhm,
I think they could have done without it for this
mm,
film. But there is less music, there's less, to me, manipulative scoring than there could be in something like this.
mm,
So she always has an appreciation for the natural world. I mean, I think that's why she made sense as a director for this.
mm.
Because
Well, they're interesting. I wish I remembered more of the details. I should have. There's an interview with her in which she talks about how she had no interest in this. I guess somebody submitted this as a possible thing for her to adapt, and she
yeah,
was just like, "Ew." She had no like. She didn't want to do Shakespeare. She didn't want to do Death of a Child. She just none of it spoke to her at all. And she was. I can't remember if she had already turned it down or was gonna turn it down. And
yeah,
she happened to be at a film festival. I'm trying to remember if it was both actors were also there. I can't remember. I think it was him, Paul Mescal, who'd
uh-huh.
read it and loved it and heard it was offered to her and was like, "Oh my God, it's not what you think. You got
Yeah,
to read it and you got to do it." And, da, da, da. And just because of the synchronicity of it, she went, "Oh, all right, I'll rethink this," and wound up doing it. But yeah, initially she had the same reaction, like this is not for me. Yeah,
makes sense. That
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And she's giving some very odd, cryptic interviews lately. I think there was one in the New York Times where she kept not telling people what it sounded like. She's at a very midlife crisis point, or things are happening, but she won't tell what's happening in her life.
Huh.
But she really made it sound like she's fighting like major emotional issues, major personal battles, major depressive. She would not say, which to her credit. She'd keep saying, "No, I really am not going to articulate that." It was
Yeah.
everything from, after one of her movies, I think Terrence Malick called her and they were like, "Oh my God, what did he say?" And she's like, "I'm not going to share that." So over and over, just like, "Nope."
Good for
When
her.
we get to the thing, it's like, "Nope, not going to actually specify." But
Yeah.
she was making it very clear she's at like some sort of emotional crossroads, in personal crossroads in her life.
Mhm.
It's quite dramatic reading it. So it also makes me wonder if this suddenly seemed more appealing because it's such an emotional crossroads movie, that she just plunged in. Yeah,
It is. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I guess it's about aging. I mean, that's not the direct topic, but like,
No.
once you're aging, you're constantly facing loss and
Mhm.
mortality. And I guess that's that. It is
Mhm.
interesting. I mean, this is sort of switching tracks, but speaking of mortality,
Mhm.
I just read the factoid that Shakespeare didn't mention the plague in his works, which is
Mhm.
so fascinating given that he was
Yeah.
alive during plague years.
Right. Yeah,
It-
and they have a sequence of him in London just wandering through, and there's, the doctor figure with the elongated nose, there's people wearing these kind of masks, they're burning, there's bonfires, they're trying to deal with the plague, and I don't think there's any dialogue, it's just him wandering through.
yes.
And, you see, of course, why Agnes won't bring the children there. It's just she perceives it as just it's too dangerous, even though the plague can go everywhere. But
Yeah.
yes, and that reminds me of like Val Lewton movies, where there's a whole book about the fact that all of these movies are taking place during World War II, and World War II is just never mentioned. And so the whole book is about this. It's called Something of Grief, and it's all about how all of the just the world of war and death is translated in the film into other kind of iconographic imagery, etc. It's very, very well done. I wish I could remember what it was. Something of Grief. It's very well done, and it really convinces you that it was just like it's more powerful, and that he hit a level of popularity that died immediately after the war. His career just goes into a nosedive as Val Lewton horror films, which had been so popular during World War II while the fighting was going on, suddenly it's like they no longer apply and everyone just drops them.
Oh my
So it
God.
really makes the case for he found a way in art to convey the overwhelming qualities of grief without just making movies about World War II and battles and people dying. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
100%.
Hmm.
There are lines from Hamlet which are featured in the film. It's the ghost speaking about, or is it him? Is it Hamlet himself? Shoot, I can't remember.
Hmm.
About the human bodies. when it succumbs to pestilence, and just like the
Mm.
horror of it. And it is, I mean, the film, I think the film
Oh, I
very,
think it's the ghost who's talking
it is the
about it coming
ghost.
through their veins and taking over their body,
Yes.
and how horrible it is. Yeah, it's the ghost. But
Yeah,
William Shakespeare is playing the ghost. It's like
exactly.
he says the words. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And it's, it's just a reminder. I mean, it's all about, it makes sense that the film, nature is the constant reference. I mean, of course, there's nothing outside of
Mhm.
nature and, whatever that, but it's also like it, the, the forest in a way is also, um, bacteria and things that tip out of
Mhm.
balance and take you over and like return you to the soil in a way
Mhm.
that is grotesque before it is peaceful.
Mhm.
It's like
Mhm.
that reality of death. And little Hamnet does not go easily, and you see him in agony.
Mhm.
And I at times I was like, oh, what purpose does this serve? But I don't know. I can't quite articulate why I do think it's important. Um,
Mhm.
it is a part of death that we find immediately scary, right? We don't want our
Mhm.
loved ones to
Yeah.
suffer. We want to spare them that.
Oh, I think yes. The vast majority of people, what is the modern death that everyone longs for? To die in your sleep without knowing
Yes.
you died. In the ancient, if you read about ancient ideas of death, that's the worst thing, at least in Christianity. That's the
Really?
worst death because you can't reconcile your soul. If you are not conscious, you can't manage your death, especially your soul's transport. So the worst thing is to be snatched away in your sleep. Oh yeah, I took a whole course on death. So
Wow.
naturally I did back in the rhetoric department as
Of
a
course you
grad
did.
student.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and I was fascinated. It was like, oh no, believe me, that would our idea of the good death is their idea of the terrible death.
Wow.
I know. Wild. Wild.
In Little Hamnet, it's their relationship to Christianity, I think, is kind of like well handled. Like,
Mhm.
yes, they're Christian by default,
Yeah.
and Will Shakespeare and Agnes get married in a church because that's what you do.
What you
Um,
do.
but
Yeah.
she's not very Christian.
Mhm.
Um, I did think it was a little heavy-handed when she articulated when her daughter is born, her second twin, and she doesn't live for a moment.
Mhm.
Um, something is alluded to, like she's in heaven, which of course wouldn't be true because the child has not been baptized,
Right.
but she said in that kind of Christian ideology anyway. And Jessie Buckley as the mother, as Anya, says something like, I don't, no, she's not in heaven. Like, I don't believe in that.
Mhm.
I wouldn't, I'll step foot in your church, but I won't really take those ways on.
Right.
But I don't know if she would have articulated that. That's pretty heretical.
Right.
She
Right.
might have had other ideas. I think it's more likely that someone like that would have like additional ideas.
Oh, and in fact, they handle something very well in not talking about it, which is she bears her first child, I think, whose name is Susanna. That's
Yes.
where I got the Susanna.
Yes.
I knew there was a Suzanne in the case.
Yeah.
Okay. In she goes out into the forest to have the
Yes.
child.
Yes.
And then when she's going to do that again with the twins
Yeah.
that she doesn't even know she's having yet, she's blocked by her mother-in-law.
Mhm.
And they won't let her run, and they out of the doors, and they literally grab her, and the implication is
Mhm.
that the birth doesn't go well because she's not having it. And you're thinking, if you're a modern person, you're looking at her out there in the dirt in
Yeah.
the mud, you're like, yeah,
Totally.
germ theory and all this probably isn't good. But no, the implication is much natural childbirth, and she's got the skills as a witch and all this jazz to do
And
this
she's got the
herself.
tree. The tree is like a protector.
Exactly. She's
Yeah.
got protective tree roots, etc., and she needs that in order to have the successful birth. So it's a much more perilous birth doing it the, quote, the sort of Christian way that's just being forced on her. Clearly they don't want her doing any pagan practices.
Yes.
So that's not really, it's made very visceral to you that she's desperately trying to get out and they won't let her out, and that she has this terribly troubled birth, and it seems like one child dies, but then it miraculously comes back, seems to come to life.
Mhm.
But that from then on, it's almost like there's an implication of Judith is never strong after that. And you're just like, oh, something about that, the birth that was forced on her and the children marked the children.
Yes.
But they don't have any dialogue. I was just like, wow, they're really, she's going to stick to her guns on that. She's not going to say.
Yep.
I mean, one thing that's a little odd is that the mother-in-law, there's nothing about how the mother-in-law comes to accept her at all. Initially, she's going to disown her. She's like, I'd rather see you dead, basically, to the son than married to this, forest witch wench, and somehow comes around, and you just have to go with it. At least in her way,
Yeah.
comes around.
It makes sense though, because the film has shown Agnes being so brave and being an excellent devoted mother.
Yeah, being a devoted
It's
mother,
not mysterious. You're like, okay, she's proved herself to this,
right, right.
judgmental mother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
So I admired that.
Yeah, no, it's nice. There's nice restraint on things where everything doesn't have to be spelled out to you. But
Yes.
be warned, because of course we are more and more trained in watching movies, that everything is explained to the point that it's just movies for dummies.
Yes.
So just keep in mind it's not going to do that for you. So you actually have to be attentive to the film, which you're going to be anyway. It's sufficiently intense that you're going to probably anyway. But just a word of warning, because again, they're doing us a horrible disservice. Movies are so communicative at so many levels. You don't also have to have swatches of dialogue in which people say what is being shown, but we get that all the time now. It's really not a good thing.
100%.
Yeah.
It is one of the most it's one of the most appealing things about the film is like the treatment of the natural world, and for lack of a better word, Agnes's paganism.
Yes.
Also,
and relatedly, the supernatural effects, or however you want to call them, paranormal effects, occult effects, I don't know what you want to say, are really handled nicely, because they do seem to just emerge simply from the natural world around them. Yeah, there's not a big division made, which is nicely handled. Yeah. So
but at the beginning, I was a little nervous. We're introduced to Agnes, long flowing hair, a little bit dirty,
red
dress, and she's got a
hawk
on her arm.
And you're kind of going, this is overkill. I know. It was also like, and of course they had to dye her hair the darkest brown I've ever seen Jessie Buckley have. And of course she has to have dark hair.
Yeah, please.
Essentially the bad witch.
She's a misfit,
or
lady of the sonnets or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but it is kind of nice in that there's two kinds of misfits here, and they're both fairly well neglected / abused by their families. So she's one kind, and he's this other kind, and he's the kind that the useless is the man who isn't out there laboring and being physically heroic. He's this scribbler. He's this writer. Yes. This writer artist figure who's never going to go. So I mean, that really helps with the immediacy of the courtship and the immediate way they come together, because they have no other home but each other, which is very touching. And it also makes the intensity of their relationship failing bigger than it would have been, because they really have each other, and that's the main thing they have as any kind of sustenance. So that's kind of good too.
Yeah, that's true. I think now that you bring that up, maybe the one, and we don't need to pick out something disappointing in this film. Like, it's so worth your seeing, but Shakespeare himself, like if you're interested in Shakespeare, and I feel like his Hamlet is beautifully handled. The depiction of Hamlet the play.
Yes.
But Will as a character is a little thin.
He is.
I don't think it's the writing. I think it's Paul Mescal.
I think it is mostly him. Though I will say this. There's a scene where the break is really happening, and she basically says, there's no need to come and see us anymore or bother with us anymore, because you're so into your London life. And we don't really see that. That should have been him coming into his own as a really worldly person that he's never been. He's always been such an artist. He's kind of poleaxed by ordinary social intercourse, and him becoming a worldly man subsumed in the world of London and other people, and running a theater and with a theater company and all of that jazz. He's clearly overcome those qualities that isolated him as youth, and there's really not a scene to convey that strongly, or maybe he's supposed to be conveying it and he isn't.
Yes.
Like that.
That's a good point. It's true. We're like that is structural, that scene ain't there. So
yeah, I think he's supposed to be manifesting it, I think.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem to me he was.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I'm gonna have to blame Paul on that.
We're
Um,
inclined to blame him anyway, so yeah.
yeah.
Why not? Why not?
And the other misstep, perhaps, is when Agnes first comes to the theater,
Mhm.
and when she's watching the beginning of Hamlet the play,
Mhm.
she's speaking back to the stage, and
Yeah.
she's somewhat offended that the name of her child, is coming out of the players' mouths, and it's like, I don't think she's that much of a rube, you know?
I had the same thing because it goes on for me, again, if we're really nippy, it goes on too long, where
Yeah,
she's just like, and you're going, "Okay, she's half out of her mind with grief and agitation anyway," but you find yourself having to excuse it. It
yeah,
goes on too long with her yelling at the stage and being unable to just watch, just watch and see. And yeah, if it was just an automatic reaction to the name, that would have been something. But even before then, there's so much agitation and shouting and refusal and everything else that it's just like after a while it's a little much. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a part of this again, just somewhat of an excess of this portrayal of her as this mud this mud witch figure
Yeah.
that has to be constantly underscored to the point that it gets a little grating, or it's not necessary. It's just
Yes.
necessary. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I did like the theater, and I loved the
Theater's
costume
wonderful.
design. Yeah. And I loved Hamlet's ghost, and the materials they used to make his
Mhm.
costume. They were very like rough hewn.
Mhm.
Sometimes when you see Elizabethan dramas, things are like very polished, and
Mhm.
like, yeah, it is doubtful things would be quite as glossy, and this is not glossy. This is like quite simple.
Yeah,
And
again, these are her best effect when they come in, the whole crowd is filing in, and it opens up and out into a quite a, as you say, it's a rough-hewn theater.
Mhm.
But somehow just that shot of bringing them in and having it open up, and we already see the forest, the flat, painted with the dark forest and the doorway. It's
Yeah.
already so strong that it actually gives you this weird living in the past thrill that you rarely get. Like, this
Yes.
actually feels like maybe what it would have been like and why people loved the theater.
Yes.
And the way they can be right on the stage with their arms resting on the stage was so beautiful. I was just like, and so they're so into it, just like,
Yep.
yeah. And it really helps set that up of like, yeah, they are 100% into this. This is as riveting an experience as you can have at the time.
Yes.
That was really nicely done with
Agree.
minimal effects, completely minimal.
Yeah. Yeah, it was gorgeous. So I don't know. I feel like this is one of the few films that deserves the Academy Award buzz, and
Mhm.
it is the kind of thing that will win, and I won't be mad.
Mm,
I don't know. What do you think between this and One Battle After Another?
that's tough because and so in the corner of one battle after another.
Yeah,
I do feel like this deserves. I'm trying to think even what is it? Yeah, it really deserves all its nominations for sure.
yeah,
She, I think, is going to get it,
yeah.
and I think she deserves it. Yeah,
Me too.
she really carries. It's
Yeah,
her and certain simple choices, simple but quite brilliant and inspired choices on Chloe Zhao's part. Chloe Zhao, she did. I almost think she should get it. It's so I'm torn. I wasn't torn before. But I
okay.
have to say, man, that ending just blew me away. I was just like, God damn, I just did not expect this. I had such little expectations of this.
Yeah.
Let me give you an illustration of how little. Favorite show of mine. I love it. I think it's BBC. It's a British show. It's called Upstart Crow. It's a David Mitchell. If you know who David Mitchell is, he's hilarious, great comedian.
Hmm.
It's all about Shakespeare. And Upstart Crow was what he was called by. What the hell is his name of his arch enemy in Elizabethan England?
Oh,
Um,
Marlowe, Christopher
no,
Marlowe.
not Marlowe. Marlowe's his friend in this.
Okay.
It's an upper cruster who, of course, is getting at him, his class, and calls him an upstart. He has no business
Hmm.
having this kind of a prestige in the world because he's a nobody. He's from, again, kind of a trade family,
Yeah.
um, if at best. But anyway, you're watching it. Hilarious. Just, you should watch it, Dolores. It's a scream
Okay.
about Shakespeare. And, the Brits know their Shakespeare. So
Yeah.
it's just brilliantly hilarious. Great portrait of what they call her Anne in that one. The husband, the wife, the kids. He's always going back and forth. London, Stratford, constantly. Always lengthy complaints about the traffic, which are pitched in terms that, of course, it sounds like he's referring to modern day traffic jams.
Yeah.
knows, like, what it would be then. But
Sure.
anyway, so it's brilliant, hilarious comedy, and you're going along, yada, da, 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 not thinking that they're going to tackle, and sure enough, you get to the episode, and there's plague, and Hamnet dies.
Oh my God.
And you're just totally like,
Oh,
you can't do that. And it pulls it off.
oh my
It just
God.
has him come home as usual. He doesn't know, just like apparently he did not know. I think I've read something about this. I was trying to read the usual, what was true, what was not true, as far as they know. It's isn't
Mhm.
much. And I think he did hear, somehow they know he did hear about it when he was not yet at home
Hmm.
and came home to find his son was dead. And so they have this happen. And of course, it's just this devastating. They don't even have to do much with it to make it devastating, but it has one of the best scenes ever about grief. And it just has, at the end of every episode, Shakespeare and his wife and are sitting side by side, both smoking little pipes by the fireside, and they're usually talking about what has occurred, his career, things with the family, the events of the day. In this, they're not speaking because they're both so completely overwhelmed with grief that they cannot talk. But what you hear is this quote, and if you look up, where in Shakespeare's work do they think he was referring to the death of his son? They'll always talk about, obviously the play Hamlet, but this from his play King John. This is always quoted. It's a woman who's talking about the death of her own child, and she says, "Grief fills the room up of my absent child, lies in his bed, walks up and down with me, puts on his pretty looks, repeats his words, remembers me of all his gracious parts, stuffs out his vacant garments with his form. Then have I reason to be fond of grief." So that's the narration. Oh my God. And I was just sitting there going, and it was so perfect. That is so insightful about grief, that you don't want grief to end because grief is keeping them alive.
Mhm.
As when you never stop thinking of them, what you're dreading is the day when you start to quote unquote get over it. And life is going to overtake it.
Mhm.
And it's going to start to recede in the past, and that person's life doesn't end with their life so much as when nobody's talking about them. Killer. And my husband had died recently, and I just was like sitting there frozen in my chair because of course you're not expecting it. It's a comedy. And they handled it so beautiful. So that's worth looking at that show just to see a completely alternative way, very much more brief, of handling grief and the kind of insight Shakespeare was having
Mhm.
into the nature of grief that you don't often think about. Usually it's like grief is terrible because you're overcome
Mhm.
with the sense of their death. Well, grief is equally, if not more terrible, when you're looking toward not being overcome. So that one's often quoted. So I was thinking, all I could keep thinking every time I thought of Hamnet, the movie, was they'll never beat Upstart Crow. I don't care. I don't care what they do. It's impossible. And then I have to say, I don't say that they beat it, did something completely different, but it's pretty devastating in the end. It really is. There's whole pieces written just on the ending.
Yeah.
Just on the ending. And unfortunately, one of them is called Explaining the Ending. And I'm like, I don't think it's going to need the ending explained.
Yeah.
Not anyway. One thing, it's quite emotionally clear what's happening in the end. I think it's that idea of the transmuting of grief and all of the extremes of human experience into art. I'm assuming that's what they mean, if they mean anything. But yeah.
Yes, I think so. Oh, I don't think it's going to get better than that. I think that's a great place to end it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, again, all we can do is reiterate. Yeah, if you're hanging back, we understand. We have many reasons for hanging back too, but really, it's totally worth it. Join the lines. Go see it while it's in theaters. Have the experience in theater. Because
Definitely.
you might not get it at TV just because of the distractions and everything. If you're forced to sit there and attend, you're going to have a much more overwhelming and enlightening experience than you would otherwise. Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
All
right. And that's it for the episode we are entitling, somewhat humorously, but really not, Hamnet, Good Grief. Really good grief.
That's so cheap.
That's our episode. And we thank you, of course. Thank you, dear listeners. And of course, triple thanks to our subscribers who keep us in mugwort and falconry gloves. If you're not a subscriber yet, but you like what you hear, please consider signing up with Patreon for all the film set content instead of just the half that's available to the public, and is now also the half available to view on YouTube, including this one. This one will be a YouTube episode. You can follow News of the Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Join us in 2 weeks for more throat-clutching episodes of Film Suck. Until then, we wish you happy viewing and, above all, moving viewing. Bye now.